Hello and welcome back to RPG PhD. I'm Dr. Ben. Tabletop role-playing games thrive in a tension between order and chaos, fairness and unpredictability. One of the most persistent debates in the hobby revolves around a deceptively simple word: balance. Should every class, character, or choice be equal in power? Should players always be on level ground with one another? Or is striving for that kind of equilibrium missing the point of what makes RPGs exciting in the first place? This video takes a critical look at what I call the myth of balance in tabletop role-playing game design and play. By myth, I don't mean a total falsehood, but rather a guiding belief that exerts enormous cultural weight, even though it is unattainable in practice. We'll explore what balance means in different contexts, why it resists perfection, how imbalance actually enriches play, what dangers arise when balance is pursued too strictly, and finally, how designers and game masters can embrace asymmetry in practical, intentional ways. So let's get into it. In almost every conversation about role-playing game design, the word balance sneaks in. We hear players debate whether one class is overpowered or whether a particular feat is broken. Designers too chase balance, creating endless errata, updates, and design notes that promise to smooth out the wrinkles of a system. But in practice, the pursuit of perfect balance in tabletop role-playing games is not only impossible, it may even be undesirable. The myth of balance is the belief that we can or should design a system where every option is equal in power, fairness, and fun. Balance in games can mean a lot of things. In competitive games like Magic the Gathering or League of Legends, balance often refers to fairness. No single deck or champion should dominate the metagame. In tabletop role-playing games, however, the goals are less clear. Is balance supposed to mean that every class contributes equally in combat? That players should have equivalent spotlight time? Or that no choice should feel like a trap option? On the surface, the appeal of balance is obvious. We like the idea that every player has a fair shot, that no one feels useless, and that the game world operates on consistent principles. Balance promises a kind of justice. Every choice is valid, every player matters, and no one feels overshadowed. Designers, too, have long been seduced by this promise. Whole editions of games are written to fix balance issues. Errata documents stretch on for pages, and house rules spring up in the name of fairness. But beneath this surface appeal lies a paradox. Role-playing games are not symmetrical competitions like chess or esports, where fairness is a prerequisite. They are collaborative by nature, storytelling, and their frameworks full of messy asymmetries, different classes, unpredictable dice, wildly creative players, and the whims of the game master. In this context, balance is less a measurable state and more a cultural myth, a guiding star that designers and players chase, often without questioning whether it is truly necessary or even possible. Robin Laws reminds us that different players approach games with different agendas. Some want tactical challenge. Some want story immersion. Some want to express character. Balance for a power gamer may look very different than balance for a storyteller. What's broken for one group might be irrelevant for another. Game designers have been chasing balance since the earliest editions of Dungeons & Dragons, and yet every attempt to fix imbalance only seems to create new ones. This isn't because designers are sloppy, it's because tabletop role-playing games, by their very nature, resist perfect calibration. At its core, a role-playing game is not a closed system. A board game, like chess or Go, is finite. The rules and pieces are fixed. And while players can innovate strategically, they cannot redefine what a rook is. Role-playing games, on the other hand, are expansive and creative. Every table invents new interpretations, hacks, and combinations. And the presence of a game master or facilitator introduces an almost infinite number of judgment calls. As game scholar Jesper Juul points out, games are half real. They exist as rules but only come alive in play, shaped by human negotiation and improvisation. In such a fluid environment, the idea of static balance is almost a category error. So let's look at some historical examples of balance problems. Original Dungeons & Dragons and early D&D. The original fighting man and magic user were radically imbalanced by design. Fighters were strong at low levels but plateaued, while wizards were fragile at level 1 but godlike at level 20. Gary Gygax himself admitted this asymmetry was intentional. Power curves created different experiences over the campaign arc. Perfect balance was never the goal. It was about variety over time. D&D 3rd edition and Pathfinder 1st edition, these editions leaned into system mastery. Players who combined feats, prestige classes, and spells cleverly could create game-breaking builds, while newcomers might stumble into trap options. The Codzilla phenomenon, cleric or druid domination, highlighted how impossible it was to keep casters and non-casters at parity across levels. 4th edition's Dungeons & Dragons, Wizards of the Coast attempted to solve this by standardizing classes into similar structures, at will, encounter, and daily powers. Mechanically, this made classes feel more balanced, but critics argued it also drained them of identity, leading to accusations of MMOification. Balance was achieved, but at the cost of flavor. Even story-forward systems like Apocalypse World or Fiasco demonstrate imbalance. Some playbooks or tilt setups naturally command more spotlight. And yet, these imbalances drive the fiction forward rather than undermining it. These examples show that paradox. Whenever designers approach perfect balance, they risk losing texture, uniqueness, and drama. Whenever they lean into flavor and diversity, imbalance naturally reappears. So let's talk about why imbalance can be a feature and not necessarily a bug. If perfect balance is an illusion, that doesn't mean designers and game masters should despair. In fact, imbalance is often what makes role-playing games memorable, dynamic, and fun. Where competitive games demand fairness to maintain integrity, tabletop role-playing games thrive on asymmetry because they are, at their core, storytelling tools of collaboration. Imbalance generates tension, creates distinctive niches, and gives players opportunities to surprise themselves and each other. One of the clearest examples comes from archetypes like the glass cannon, characters who deal immense damage but crumble under pressure. In Shadowrun, the street samurai can mow down a squad of enemies in seconds, but a single mage with a well-timed spell can turn the tide. That imbalance fuels drama. The samurai's player knows they walk a razor's edge, and the table holds its breath when a stray bullet or botched roll threatens to bring them down. The imbalance doesn't break the game, it makes the game by providing stakes and contrast. The Frodo principle, narrative over numbers. Narrative fiction is filled with imbalanced characters, and role-playing games often work best when they mirror this. In The Lord of the Rings, Frodo is mechanically weaker than Aragorn or Gandalf. He's not a great warrior nor a powerful wizard, yet Frodo holds the most important role in the story. His imbalance highlights his uniqueness, the small, fragile character who carries the heaviest burden. Role-playing games echo this dynamic when the weaker character becomes the narrative linchpin, whether it's the bard who negotiates peace or the underpowered thief who slips through a crack no warrior could enter. Asymmetry can create texture and identity. Balance often requires flattening differences, but imbalance creates texture. In Blades in the Dark, each playbook shines in a different narrative context. The cutter is unstoppable in a brawl, but the slide can manipulate an entire social scene, and the whisperer can bend ghosts to their will. None of these roles are equally effective in every situation, but that's the point. Their asymmetry ensures that the story bends and twists depending on who takes action, keeping every session varied. In tabletop role-playing games, the same holds true. Distinctiveness is often worth more than strict parity. Friction can also be used as a story engine. Game design theorist Justin Alexander argues that imbalance creates friction, and friction is the engine of drama. If every challenge were met with perfectly matched abilities, the story would flatten into predictability. Imbalance ensures that characters encounter situations outside their comfort zones, forcing collaboration and creativity. When the heavily armored fighter faces an enemy immune to blades, suddenly the rogue or wizard must step forward. When the eloquent bard fumbles a negotiation, the barbarian's blunt intimidation might save the day. These unexpected pivots are often the most talked about moments after a session ends. Ironically, imbalance often helps distribute narrative spotlight more effectively than balance does. If all characters were equally effective in all situations, then the fastest or loudest player might always dominate. But asymmetry forces the spotlight to rotate. When the scene shifts from combat to intrigue or from dungeon crawl to ritual, different characters naturally take center stage. This is one reason why the classic D&D party structure, fighters, rogues, wizards, clerics, endures. Their imbalances ensure different domains of story. Finally, imbalance can make victories feel more earned. If the rules guarantee that every character has an equal chance of success, then triumph may feel mechanical. But when the odds are lopsided and a player pulls off an unlikely success or survives against something far stronger, the emotional payoff is enormous. Imbalance is not a design failure, necessarily. It's the raw material of drama. It creates tension, texture, and unique identities within a party. It ensures the story keeps shifting, handing the spotlight to different characters as circumstances change. And it transforms moments of success or survival into legendary tales. In short, imbalance is not something to be fixed, but something to be managed, celebrated, and wielded with intentionality. The messiness of asymmetry is, in many ways, the soul of tabletop play. So now let's look at spotlight versus stat balance. When players and designers talk about balance, they often conflate two different concepts: statistical balance, mechanical fairness in the rules, and spotlight balance, ensuring every player has meaningful narrative impact. These are not the same thing, and confusing them leads to endless arguments about what balance in tabletop role-playing games should even mean. So, stat balance is the mathematical side. Are characters, abilities, or monsters equally effective in comparable situations? If one class consistently deals twice the damage of another in combat, or one spell trivializes entire categories of challenge, the system is mechanically lopsided. Designers worry about stat balance because it affects perceived fairness. Nobody likes feeling useless because the numbers on their character sheet can't keep up. But stat balance has limits. For one thing, no character sheet can predict every table. The game master's style, the campaign's theme, and the group's creative energy all distort the numbers. A bard might look weaker on paper, but in a politics-heavy game, they may outshine the party's warrior at every turn. Spotlight balance, by contrast, is about who gets to shine in the story. It asks, does each character have moments where their unique abilities, decisions, or perspective matter? A game can be mechanically unbalanced but still thrive if everyone feels they have a role to play in the narrative. The spotlight moves not because of equal math, but because the friction creates distinct spaces for different characters to matter. This is one reason why imbalanced parties in D&D or Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay can still be deeply satisfying. The knight with a gleaming sword and the rat catcher with a small but vicious dog are not balanced mechanically, but they both get spotlight when the game master sets up situations where each of their quirks matters. Spotlight can often matter more than stats. A campaign remembered fondly is rarely remembered for perfectly even damage per round. Instead, players recall moments: the rogue climbing the impossible tower, the cleric making a last-second prayer, the underdog commoner who somehow survived a chaos ambush. Those memories come from Spotlight, not stats. Of course, the Game Master has a role in Spotlight balance. Unlike stat balance, which is baked into design, Spotlight balance often lives in the hands of the Game Master. A skilled Game Master will rotate scenes, switch between combat, social, and exploration challenges so different characters shine. They will tailor the stakes. They'll create problems that only one PC can solve. Only the thief can reach the artifact before the trap resets. They will elevate quirks. They give narrative weight to low-power characters. A rat catcher's local contacts might uncover what no wizard's divination could. They distribute tension. They allow quieter players to have spotlight by slowing down and pointing the narrative lens toward them. When done well, this creates a feeling of equity even if the numbers don't line up. Everyone gets to feel central to the unfolding story. So let's look at a little case study, Warhammer versus D&D. In Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, imbalance is built into the DNA of the system. A peasant with 27% weapon skill sits beside a knight in gleaming armor, and yet both can feel crucial when the Game Master distributes spotlight through social intrigue, survival horror. The system does not pretend to offer stat balance. It relies on narrative to even the scales. By contrast, Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition attempted to enforce stat balance by giving every class roughly parallel power structures. The result was mechanical fairness, but critics argued it reduced narrative distinction. A wizard and a fighter both had daily powers, which felt similar in structure, even if different in flavor. Here, spotlight balance suffered because mechanical parity flattened narrative variety. Stat balance matters enough to prevent frustration, but spotlight balance is what makes a game feel alive. A system doesn't have to promise that everyone is equally strong in the same way. It only needs to ensure that everyone has meaningful chances to matter. When spotlight is distributed with care, imbalance becomes not a bug, but a narrative feature. Let's talk about some of the dangers of overbalancing. If imbalance can be a source of drama and uniqueness, then it follows that overbalancing can have the opposite effect. While a baseline of fairness is important, nobody wants to feel like they wasted their character choice. Pursuing balance too aggressively often strips away the very qualities that make tabletop role-playing games compelling in the first place. When balance becomes the overriding design goal, games risk becoming sterile, repetitive, or overly rigid. One of the most common dangers is flattening distinctiveness. If every option must be equally viable in every scenario, then options inevitably start to look and feel the same. Overbalancing often leads to rule sprawl, layers of restrictions designed to close loopholes and prevent exploits. But in patching every unfair interaction, designers can inadvertently stifle creativity. Players often delight in breaking the game, whether through clever spell use, unexpected combinations, or sheer ingenuity. When systems over-police those possibilities, they risk alienating players who thrive on experimentation. Jesper Juul reminds us that uncertainty and freedom are core to why games engage us. Too much balancing strips away uncertainty, leaving only predictable outcomes. Another danger is losing sight of what tabletop role-playing games are for. Perfectly tuned combat encounters may feel balanced on paper, but if every fight feels like a carefully engineered chess puzzle, the sense of emergent storytelling can fade. In overbalanced systems, dramatic swings, like a rogue critting for absurd damage or a cleric's desperate prayer unexpectedly turning the tide, get ironed out in the name of fairness. But these are exactly the moments players remember years later. Balanced encounters can also feel oddly safe. If the Game Master only ever presents challenges calibrated to the party's level, then players never experience the thrill of being outmatched or the satisfaction of overcoming something they shouldn't have been able to beat. So if we look at some different player types, the tactician may appreciate finely tuned encounters, but the storyteller, method actor, or casual gamer often find rigid balance boring. Overbalancing narrows the appeal of a system by privileging one player agenda, fair tactical play, over others. We can see the tension between balance and richness across the role-playing game landscape. 3.5e and Pathfinder 1e leaned into imbalance, allowing extreme builds and broken combos. This delighted optimizers, but frustrated casual players. Indie games like Apocalypse World embrace imbalance openly. A gun lugger in combat vastly outpaces a brainer, but in social or psychic scenes, the tables turn. Here, imbalance is the design. Spotlight rotates instead of stats leveling out. At the deepest level, overbalancing risks draining the narrative juice from a campaign. Stories thrive on uneven terrain, heroes punching above their weight, villains who feel unstoppable, characters defined by quirks and flaws. When everyone is equally competent in all situations, the story loses its tension. Instead of an ensemble with distinct highs and lows, you get a flat chorus where no voice stands out. Balance matters, but it should never be pursued to the point of homogeneity. Overbalancing flattens choice, restricts creativity, and prioritizes fairness at the expense of drama. If perfect balance is impossible, and overbalancing often strips away the flavor of play, what should game masters and designers do instead? The answer is not to abandon balance entirely, but to reframe it. Rather than thinking of balance as strict numerical parity, we can treat it as an ecosystem of roles, spotlights, and opportunities. The trick is to lean into asymmetry while making sure everyone still has a way to matter. So here are a few strategies to think about. First, design for niche protection. One of the most reliable ways to make asymmetry work is through niche protection. Designing or running the game so each character has a unique corner of expertise. They don't need to be equally strong in raw numbers. They just need distinct spaces where they shine. In Dungeons & Dragons, the rogue's sneak attack, the cleric's healing, and the wizard's spells may not be balanced across all encounters, but each guarantees moments where only that character can change the tide. In Blades in the Dark, no one playbook is balanced across every type of job. Instead, each has specialized tools that ensure they dominate in certain narrative contexts. Next, spotlight management as a game master's skill. Since asymmetry thrives on context, game masters have a unique responsibility to rotate the spotlight intentionally. This can be more powerful than any rulebook balancing act. So scene rotation, don't run 4 combat encounters in a row if you know the bard shines in social intrigue. Change gears so different strengths matter. Create tailored problems. Introduce challenges that only certain player characters can solve. The lock is delicate and only a rogue's touch will work. Or challenge diversity. Mix combat, exploration, and social puzzles so characters with different strengths get a turn in the limelight. One designer frames this in terms of player agendas. By shifting spotlight across player types, tacticians, storytellers, power gamers, you create a rhythm that feels balanced, even if the math isn't. Celebrate swinginess. Instead of avoiding it, one of the joys of asymmetry is that it creates swingy, unpredictable outcomes. A weak character can succeed spectacularly with a lucky roll. A powerful one can fail at the worst possible moment. These moments of contrast are where stories live. Lean into fictional balance. Not all balance has to be mechanical. Fictional positioning can do the heavy lifting. A character might be weak in combat, but uniquely positioned to influence the story. The Ratcatcher in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay isn't going toe-to-toe with Chaos Warriors, but their grubby street knowledge might uncover the cult's secret lair. For designers, asymmetry can be embraced more directly. Instead of designing every option to be equally effective, design them to be differently effective. Build distinct power curves. Fighters peak early, casters late. This creates arcs and contrasts that mirror narrative structures. Steady hero versus late bloomer. Encourage situational dominance. Some abilities should only shine in certain contexts. That's what makes those contexts exciting. Bake in meaningful trade-offs. A character who is devastating in combat might be socially inept. A charismatic diplomat may collapse in a dungeon crawl. Balance emerges not from parity, but from counterpoint. So let's think about the bigger picture a little bit. From balance to harmony. Thinking about asymmetry is like thinking about music. In music, harmony doesn't mean every note is identical. It means different notes work together to create a richer whole. In tabletop role-playing games, the same is true. Balance doesn't mean equivalence. It means everyone's contribution feels vital to the shared composition. By protecting niches, rotating spotlights, celebrating swingy outcomes, leaning on fictional positioning, and embracing asymmetry as a design tool, game masters and designers can move beyond the myth of balance. What results isn't a sterile equality, but a living, breathing ecosystem of play, messy, unfair, and wonderfully human. Now, let's talk about critiques of the asymmetry first approach. Before we cheerfully toss perfect balance into the bin, it's worth steel-manning the critics. Designers, game masters, and players who favor stronger balance aren't being dull, they're guarding important values: fairness, clarity, accessibility, and reliable fun across many tables. Here's their case in depth. Fairness and accessibility. Critics argue that meaningful choice requires informed odds. If options are uneven, newcomers can't tell the difference between a colorful flaw and a trap option until many sessions later. That can erode trust and create buyer's remorse. In organized play or convention games where the game master can't always tailor scenes to each player character, mechanical baselines protect players from drawing the short straw just because they didn't know the system's hidden hierarchies. The game master burden and the perception of favoritism. An asymmetry first stance often says the game master will fix it in Spotlight. Critics reply that outsources design work to the game master, constantly compensating for weak builds, salvaging scenes when swinginess wrecks pacing, and engineering bespoke spotlights is cognitive and emotional labor. Worse, it risks the appearance of favoritism. Some players will suspect the GM likes certain characters more when narrative fixes repeatedly rescue them. Spotlight does not equal agency, the Frodo fallacy. Being narratively important is not the same as being mechanically capable. Critics warn that telling a weak character you matter in the story while others carry the action can feel like consolation spotlight. If your big contributions arrive only by Game Master fiat, the Duke happens to trust you, players may feel railroaded rather than empowered. Agency, they argue, requires repeatable tools that work without special treatment. Swinginess can undercut strategy. Asymmetry often pairs with high variance. Critics concede that wild moments are memorable, but too much volatility punishes planning. Rocket tag combat, so high level 3.5 casters versus marshals, or binary save or suck effects, compress the game into initiative lotteries. If outcomes hinge more on variance than on decision quality, tacticians disengage. Social dynamics and table equity. Relying on social negotiation to balance Spotlight privileges assertive vocal players. Quieter or newer players may never claim their due, and an asymmetrical kit can make that worse. Stronger mechanical footing gives built-in advocacy. Your sheet demands scenes. Critics frame this as an equity issue, not just a math issue. Power curves and character obsolescence. Deliberate asymmetry across levels, early marshals, late casters, creates campaign whiplash. Someone shines at 1 to 5, someone else owns 13 to 17. If your group rarely reaches the payoff tier, the late bloomer never blooms. If they do, early standouts become sidekicks. Critics prefer flatter power trajectories, things like bounded accuracy, so everyone remains relevant across the arc. Metagame convergence and gatekeeping. Left unmanaged, asymmetry invites a meta. Communities reverse engineer best in slot choices, and table culture nudges everyone toward them. Players who pick for concept over output get told they're hurting the team. Critics see this in the 3.5 Pathfinder tier lists and Shadowrun's cyber adept arms races. Balance, even if imperfect, widens viable space and dampens optimization pressure. Genre, emulation, and tone. Some genres demand shared heroism. Superhero teams, heists, and ensembles feel wrong if one PC is consistently a passenger. Asymmetry that fits grim survivalist play, like Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, can jar in bright cinematic genres. Critics want system genre coherence, mechanics that reliably deliver the promised fantasy without game master contortions. Organized play, teaching, and publishing reality. Publishers must ship games that work for strangers at public tables. You can't assume bespoke game master fixes or long session zeros. Stronger balance gives predictable encounter design and easier onboarding. In certain environments, people who are trying to teach the game, teachers favor systems where no choice quietly sabotages the learner experience. Finally, critics bristle when imbalance fuels drama becomes a blanket pardon for avoidable errors. Mispriced feats, non-scaling class features, or inconsistently written subsystems. They don't demand sterile symmetry, they want measured tolerances, explicit trade-offs, and proofs that designers tested beyond a home group. So what critics usually want designers to do, these are their constructive demands. Eliminate trap options and label high-skill picks clearly. Publish power budgets or expected output bands by tier. Bound the floor and ceiling, so guarantee baseline competence while curbing one-turn win buttons. Prefer advantage stacking caps and diminishing returns over hard mirrors. Telegraph trade-offs. Peaks late, situational specialist, glass cannon. Put this in the text, not under the hood. And provide game master scaffolds that reduce labor. Spotlight rotation tools, scene type checklists, or encounter role templates. Safety valves for runaway swinginess. And ship variants, a tight parity mode for organized tables and a wild swing mode for drama-hungry home games. And test across playstyles. Tactical dungeon, intrigue, sandbox to ensure choice isn't viable only under one game master archetype. So the bottom line from the critic's view is that asymmetry can be exciting, but unmanaged asymmetry shifts work onto the game master, amplifies social inequities, and narrows viable choices. Balance in this view isn't about making everyone the same, it's about guaranteeing agency, clarity, and fairness so that the table's creativity, rather than hidden math, drives the drama. In the end, balance in tabletop role-playing games is less a rule to obey than a story we tell ourselves. It reassures us that everyone is on equal footing, but when we look closer, we find that imbalance is actually everywhere, and that it often makes the stories better. Heroes shine because they are uneven. Dice thrill us because they are capricious. Parties endure because each member brings something the others can't necessarily bring. That doesn't mean balance has no place. Designers still need to avoid trap options. Game masters still need to watch for spotlight drift, and groups still deserve fairness at the table. But balance should be treated as a tool, not a destination. The real magic happens when asymmetry is not just tolerated, but celebrated, as the spark that makes the game world feel alive, unpredictable, and human. So, the next time you hear someone complain that a class is overpowered or that a mechanic feels unfair, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, is this an error to be patched, or the seed of the next great story? So, let me know your thoughts on balance in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content. And as always, thanks for watching. See you next time.